A revolution in natural medicine is underway, and Blue Earth Medicine podcast featuring Dr. Jill Johnson and host Brad Johnson will lead you on a fun and interesting journey into naturopathic medicine. The information in our podcast, articles, or videos are not intended to replace one-on-one relationships with your personal healthcare provider and is not intended as medical advice. We encourage you to seek advice from your naturopathic doctor or healthcare provider. Thank you for joining us, and we're glad you're here. Welcome to the Blue Earth Medicine Podcast. We're coming to you from the Pacific Northwest in our Seattle area studio. We're your hosts. I'm Brad Johnson, and with me, naturopathic Dr. Jill Johnson. And together we'll explore the world of natural medicine, take a deep dive into health topics, and give you tips and tricks to stay healthy naturally and have fun doing it. Today, Dr. Jill and I will discuss a timely topic many of us are dealing with right now, the cold and flu season, titled, You're Sick, Now What? Welcome back, Dr. Jill, and welcome back to our audience of wonderful, loyal followers and listeners. This is it's a great time to be healthy.
Yes, it is. Thanks so much, and welcome everybody. Thanks for listening.
I guess we're just going to jump into this here. We got a bunch of questions that I have prepared for us here today.
Right.
So, I guess the first thing I like to think about when we're talking about illness and sickness, like how do we get sick? Let's begin at the beginning and imagine that you're just starting to feel as though something's just not quite right in your body. So if you can help us explain what's happening physiologically and symptomatically that we might be feeling as we're getting sick.
Yeah, so actually the beginning of a sickness isn't necessarily when you start feeling sick. It could take up to 2 weeks of being exposed to something before you really start feeling sick. It could take 3 days or, much shorter period of time before you start feeling like you're getting sick. And so what's happening is you get exposed to something new, whether that's a new virus, and because it's cold and flu season, those things are viruses. And so you get exposed to a new virus, and it could be a new strain of a virus or a mutated one, like we've been hearing about different variants. And then your body starts to respond. The immune system starts to respond. And it takes a bit of time for the immune system to really kick in fully. And when we start feeling sick, our immune system's already been working for however many days. And it's just not able to keep up. And so it's just working hard, and we start feeling symptoms because our immune system is trying to keep up with the overload of, let's say, viruses, because it's cold and flu season. It just can't keep up with managing or killing off extra viruses. And so they kind of take over and start creating some havoc in your system. And depending on what the virus is, you may feel a sore throat, you might feel stomach ache, nausea, you might feel body aches, you might feel hotter, your temperature may be increasing, which may or may not lead to a fever. We'll talk about fever a little bit later. You might get a cold sore, actually. Those are common before you really start feeling any signs of sickness, cough. So
that's like it's like an early warning symptom, maybe. Like if you start noticing these, precursors to the real full onset of an illness, is like maybe a cold sore appears as like, hey, that's warning, ding, 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 listen up, what's going on?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so we need to pay attention to those kind of symptoms or those things that are happening that seem a little out of the ordinary. Hey, I have a cold sore. Why might that be? So yeah, paying attention to those things, then we can support our body the way it needs to be early on, which is the best time to support our body to help us or prevent us from getting any worse and help our immune system to do its job better.
Okay, we'll be talking about some of those things that you can do at home as you're starting to, to kind of brace yourself, kind of planning ahead, but also at the first indications that something's not quite right. We'll have some tips for you towards the end of the show. This is really interesting stuff, and most of us realize that there are bugs, for lack of a better word, germs, things that are small, but basically viral and bacterial infections. Now, when we think of like becoming sick, we recognize that there are two different kind of agents that can, at least a couple different things that can make us feel icky. Can you kind of walk us through the essential differences between kind of a bacterial sickness and a viral sickness?
Well, they could feel the same. We just don't know. And so it's a good idea, if you're not sure whether it's a viral or bacterial illness, to get that checked out. And really, essentially, it's the structure of these microbes that's extremely different and how they progress in their infection. So viruses, to just kind of simplify the idea, viruses get into our system, they attach to a cell, and then they're really just carrying around DNA or RNA, depending on the virus. Let's just say, for example, DNA. They're going to inject their DNA into our cell, and then viruses are kind of sneaky. They actually utilize our own cellular systems to make more and more and more of viral DNA. And so then all these little viral DNAs make the viruses, and so they hijack our own cells and our own cell processes to make more of themselves. It's pretty insidious and pretty ingenious, really.
So can I jump in for a second? So does our body not recognize that there's virus inside the cells and that they're replicating themselves there?
Our body does recognize viruses when they get in, but they can start replicating pretty quickly. And cells that get infected with viral DNA or RNA actually have chemical signals that they secrete. They basically push out when they get infected to inform all the surrounding cells, hey, I'm infected, put up a barrier or put up defenses so you don't get infected too. So that's that's a very early on thing that happens. But, once a virus gets in and starts to replicate, then all of those additional viruses can circulate throughout the body, go to wherever they can attach, and create illness or create havoc, if you will, on our system. And they can target certain organs because of how they bind to the cell or how they connect or attach to the cell. So if we can prevent those viruses from actually attaching to the cells, that would be prime, right? We want to make sure that those viruses, even if they get into our body, cannot attach to our cells or attach to very few. So we can minimize the illness. And that's some of the treatments that we're going to talk about later. I think one or two of them actually help prevent that attachment of the virus to the cell. So it prevents them from actually being able to replicate their DNA and make new viruses, which is really helpful when you're trying to stay healthy.
You kind of broke up there as you're trying to stay healthy.
Oh, as you're trying to stay healthy.
Well, that's really fascinating. So that's viral infections. And so I like the idea that the cells are like putting shields up, or I just imagine it as like some sort of either making the surface difficult for the virus to penetrate or making it easy for the virus to penetrate, depending on how our bodies are responding to the attack. So that's virus. How about bacterial infections? How does that look?
So bacterial infections are not really going to feel any different to you. Your symptoms may be the same. You might have a cough. You might be congested. You may have body aches, headache, all those things that we know. But bacteria is different in that bacteria does not insert itself into a cell. Bacteria just replicate, and they replicate and they replicate. And so if our immune system is somewhat compromised or it's not working up to par, then the bacteria that is normally in our body, which we have lots and lots of bacteria in our system, it can start reproducing so much, and there's nothing to kind of manage that reproduction, which is just what it does. And so it can overtake parts of the body, and we can end up with a bacterial infection. For example, like strep throat. Strep throat is a bacterial infection that can cause our tonsils to get really swollen, red, and very often you see kind of pustules, basically pus-filled sacs, little white dots on the tonsils that tell us that's a bacterial infection.
Yeah, and it hurts like crazy.
Right, and it hurts like crazy. Now, there are viral infections that also can impact the throat and hurt like crazy in the throat, give you a sore throat and swollen tonsils and all that same stuff. So it's good to go see a doctor to get an idea of, well, what kind of infection do I have? Because that might very often will impact how you need to treat it. Hopefully I've answered the question.
Yeah. Let me just, I have a question back at you. So you said that there'll be an accumulation of bacteria that you keep reproducing. So it sounds like that there, maybe perhaps there's strep bacteria, streptococcus bacteria living in our body all the time?
There is, yes.
So what keeps it from going, what makes it kind of go out of control and make us feel sick?
That's a good question. Usually there could be a number of reasons, but one common one is potentially our immune system is somewhat suppressed. For example, high sugar or high refined carbohydrate diets like white flour, like cookies, candy, all the stuff we've been eating over the holidays.
Since Halloween, right?
Since Halloween, the candy season. Yeah, all of those sweets, alcohol, all those things can minimize or dampen our immune system's ability to actually function. And so if our immune system's just kind of dampened down, just kind of pushed down because of our diet or, excesses, maybe excess stress can also dampen our immune system. And so the bacteria, because they're not being modulated or regulated by our own immune system because it's now dampened, they'll just continue to reproduce and we can then get a bacterial infection.
Gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like maybe we set ourselves up beginning around
very often
Halloween.
We can, yes, very often.
So the candy's flown free for almost 3 months, and you start seeing a lot of illness coming. Of course, it's cold, it's wet, it's damp, especially out here in the Pacific Northwest.
And we stay more inside too, which, less air to air out our homes and closer quarters with other people and parties and things like that. Give us more opportunity to actually be exposed to something new.
So, once we start to feel sick, we just want to feel better, right? We want to feel better. And of course, there's always somebody there to take advantage of us wanting to feel better. And that's the place where big business kind of jumps in, or pharmaceutical companies to want to, jump on it. So in fact, I found some research. Now it's dated. This is 20 years ago. This is a study from the University of Michigan, a researcher who did a study in 2003. And the findings were that at that point, 20 years ago, we spent $40 billion a year on the war against the common cold. And what they found was that Americans spend, and this is again 20 years ago, Americans spend $2.9 billion a year on over-the-counter drugs to combat the common cold. And then get this, another $400 million a year on prescription medicines to relieve that. So that means more than $1.1 billion spent annually, and an estimated 41 million antibiotic prescription for cold sufferers happen, even though antibiotics have no effect on viral illness. Yikes. I hope that sinks in. So we're prescribing, because, when you're in a conventional doctor's office, you got 5 to 15 minutes to get through the stuff. Oh, you're sick? It's probably, maybe it's this, and it's easy to pass off an antibiotic. So Let's talk about over-the-counter medication and the prescriptions that we're being directed to take, and what that means really to healing.
Yeah. So let's talk about antibiotics, because that was the last thing in that quote, right?
Mm-hmm.
So antibiotics are only going to work on bacterial infections. Okay. I'm going to say that again. Antibiotics only work on bacterial infections, not viruses. So if you have a cold, if you have the flu, those are viruses. And so there are some antiviral medications. Now, in my recent research on how effective they are, what I found was the main one, and I think it was, I forget the name, antiviral medication that's found in Tamiflu, only decreased the number of days people were sick by 1 day. So people were sick, say, 10 days without Tamiflu. People were sick for 9 days with Tamiflu. So take that as you may. That's one study, one thing that I researched on antiviral medications. Now, there have been newer ones, especially with the SARS-CoV-2 virus and COVID. So there's been new developments that I haven't done a lot of research on. So
I think that's the challenge as a naturopathic doctor. You have to not only be versed in kind of natural medicine modalities, you also have to be versed in conventional medicine modalities. And, that's a lot of medical school training. So let's shift from kind of over the counter things to let's talk about herbal preparations or homeopathics or other things that NDs use, and in ways that they're unique to promoting health compared to conventional medicine approaches.
Well, I do want to go back to over-the-counter. So prescription medication is different than over-the-counter. So over-the-counter, a lot of times we feel cruddy. We kind of have, a higher temperature, eyes burn, but, we need to keep going, right? We need to push through. We need to get that project done at work, whatever the case may be, take care of the kids. And so we go to the pharmacy and we pick up something that's going to help our symptoms or help us sleep better or keep us, stop us from coughing. So what those medications really are doing are suppressing or minimizing your symptoms, which, you might be saying, yeah, I like that. That's exactly what I wanted to do. But I want to really give you a little cautionary tale here that anytime a symptom is suppressed, we're not allowing the body to fully heal from that infection. So say it's a cold. So if we don't allow the body to fully go through the healing process, we suppress the symptoms by taking cold medication or fever-reducing medication or whatever that may be. We're not allowing the body then to fully go through the process it needs to for us to fully heal. And so you might feel better, but that doesn't mean that you are fully healed. The body keeps track of things like this. The body knows the cells have memory. The body has memory about what has impacted it in the past. And if it's not allowed to go through its full cycle, we may have issues later on that we don't foresee. And so we need to be cognizant of the effects of suppressing symptoms that we experience. And I realize there are many situations that we need to just plow through. We need to get this done. We have obligations to our family, to our work, to ourselves, particularly ourselves. So,
Right.
yeah. So just know that is the case, that suppressing a symptom is not the same as curing an illness or letting the body heal that illness.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, where does, if we're just really suppressing an illness by taking, these symptom relievers, where does that illness go? Does it just go down deeper? Does it hide? It just always makes me wonder what's going on when that happens.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think anybody really understands where that may go. It may be, it's not like it's stored somewhere. It's in the memory of cells. It could be neurologically that there's signaling going on. Nobody really knows how that actually is going to be preserved within that cellular structure. But I can get into the energetics of our body and the vibrations of our body, electromagnetic frequencies, and all of that stuff, which is all part of us, all part of viruses, bacteria, anything that might make us sick. So all of those things have frequencies, and we may be shifting those frequencies enough where we don't feel it right now, but maybe later as we get older, as something happens, we're in a car accident, or we take a certain medication, or we're exposed to air pollution or smoke in the fall, like many of us are, those vibrations may become more prevalent. Yeah. And so it's hard to say. I mean, we just don't know. I'm speculating here.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting what you have to say. I find it really fascinating. I wonder how many people can actually hear what you're having to say, because it's some of the stuff that, we in the natural medicine world talk about and actually, philosophically are grounded in are quite a bit of ways from what conventional medicine would even be willing to hear. So on that, I'm going to pivot to the converse to the over-the-counter medications that we get when we just go to the store to get some stuff. What do naturopaths do when you're not feeling well? I mean, we're not symptom suppressing, or are we? What goes on when we treat a sick person?
Well, symptom suppression can be useful. I mean, it depends. How severe is the symptom? Sometimes it's just so severe that you just, as a person who's sick, you need some relief. And that's when suppressing a symptom temporarily is a good idea, just to give somebody some reprieve while we work on other things. And so that's very often in my practice how I do things. I generally don't initially look for pharmaceuticals. It really depends on the severity and what somebody might be experiencing. But I look at how can we work on those foundations of health. What's the diet? What's hydration? How are you sleeping? What's your stress level? How can we reduce that? And so those types of things that help us stay healthy, which we all know about. We hear about it over and over and over again. But we also need to trust that our body is meant to heal. That is one of its purposes. It is meant to heal. As long as we are doing what we can to make sure it can heal, it has the right nutrients, it has the right hydration, it has the proper sleep, I decrease stress so my immune system isn't tamped down, I move so my body can produce more fluids in the joints, so and my muscles can move better, and so all those things can help us stay healthy. what we can do in terms of if we do get sick or when we do get sick, because we all will get sick at some point or another. If we're taking herbal, a lot of times what I see people doing, if they're, just kind of trying to figure out how to help themselves feel better on their own, they'll take herbal medicines as if it was an over-the-counter type of medicine. So there are lots of herbs that will suppress symptoms. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes we want to make sure that we get rid of the microbes, the extra microbes that are causing us illness. That's okay if we're going to target those microbes. There are herbs that can help regulate the immune system and tell the immune system, oh, we need more of you to help heal this illness. Or guess what? We may need less of you to actually heal better. Sometimes that happens. So there are herbs that can kind of decide what the body needs or read the body better than we can. And so herbs can be used as conventional medicine to suppress symptoms. But herbs can also be used to support the body, to help it fight off an infection, to help it do what it needs to do so you can fully heal, the body can fully heal, and you can get on with your life.
Yeah. In my mind right now, I can hear people thinking, geez, what are those herbs? And I think this is the point where I want to say this is a great opportunity to connect with your naturopathic doctor near you,
right,
or a trusted and trained herbalist that can help you navigate these. Really, herbal medicine is an interesting and complex field, and a lot of us, we'll just go to the internet and look for advice. But I think finding a good teacher, a good physician that's qualified to give you advice in these areas is really warranted, and I would recommend it. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I'd also like to mention, a lot of times we go to the internet, and the internet is a great resource. It is, but there's so much information, and a lot of times it can be contradicting. Two different things will contradict each other. And so what do we do? How much do I take? It's hard to know how much of something to take just based on the advice from Dr. Google. So going to a naturopathic doctor or your doctor to find out what is going to help me the most, what is that dosage? Because very often, there's a recommended dosage on the bottle. In my experience, that is often too little. It's not therapeutic, where even if you take as much as what's in the bottle, it's not going to have the effect you need. So you need a professional, a trained herbalist, a naturopathic doctor to help you figure out what are those dosages that are going to be helpful and not be too much, because you can get too much. There is the thing of too much of a good thing. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're taking the right dose for you and for what you're experiencing.
Right, very good. Hey, I want to kind of jump ahead of here a little bit. So we're kind of bumping up on our time well here. A lot of times, when we get sick at home, we want to help ourselves, right? And a lot of us, especially if we're in the natural medicine, naturopathic medicine, herbalism, we want to heal ourselves. And so what do you recommend to your patients when they're starting to feel icky at home? What kind of some quick take-home messages for folks?
Yeah, so probably you've heard these all your life. Lots of rest, lots of liquid, and hydration. If you have a fever, let it run. If it gets highly uncomfortable or where you're concerned, you can use cool cloths on your forehead or around the back of your neck, or kind of across your shoulders, to cool yourself down slightly. You could, if you were up to it, even take not a hot bath, but a warm bath where it feels cool to your skin. If you're very concerned about your temperature. But I also want to talk a little bit about what is a fever. So our temperature throughout the day can vary anywhere. So 98.6 is average temperature. You should know what your general temperature is. So you could, wake up every morning for 2 weeks and you're going to take your temperature and you're going to average that out. That's your temperature. Going from what your average temperature is, it can vary throughout the day up to 1.5 degrees either way. So if I'm sitting at 98.6, 1.5 degrees lower is 97.1. So I could be as low as 97.1. That's considered normal, or 1.5 degrees above. So I could be up to 99.7. That's also considered normal. So that range is all considered within the realm of normal. So 99 degrees is not a fever. And in fact, when doctors are speaking, fever begins at 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you've got 100-degree temperature, 101 or 100.2 degree temperature, that's only considered an elevated temperature. It's not considered a fever yet. And if that's as high as your temperature goes, you need to leave it. Do not reach for Tylenol. Do not reach for acetaminophen, ibuprofen, because that fever is your body's way of trying to heal itself. It is healing. That fever is healing. Now, if it gets upwards of 104, 105, now, let's use that cool cloth, a tepid bathtub to help bring our temperature maybe, 0.5 degree or so down, just to make sure we don't get too hot, because that also can be dangerous.
And this is where I say consult your personal physician, your naturopathic medical provider, to get their opinion and advice. So, so we talked about we haven't talked about steam yet.
So dry air, which also in the winter with the heat, we have drier air. That leads to drier mucous membranes, like in our nose. And viruses love the dryness. So if you can keep some moisture in your air, that's really helpful. If you feel congested or feel like you're stuffy all the time in the house, even if you're not sick, you might want to try adding some moisture to the air. Put a big pot of water on the stove, turn it on low, and just let it evaporate into the air. That can be really helpful. You can get a humidifier in your bedroom. But steaming, especially with congestion, sinus issues, steaming can be extremely beneficial to break up that fluid. It basically adds moisture to the mucus that you've been producing. That mucus gets thinner and thinner, and then it can drain out as it needs to from the sinuses. You can blow it out by blowing your nose, cough it up easier. So steaming is an extremely valuable tool that is super simple to do. You just boil some water, put it in a bowl, put a towel over your head and your face over the steam.
That seemed like a good thing that we could put on our blog page, talk about how to give yourself a good steam. We're down to about 3 minutes to go, and I just want to have us kind of go quickly through the list of what items do you keep handy during cold and flu season. Then we'll kind of wrap this up. And
one of my first and something I take every day is elderberry. I usually take a tincture just because it can last longer, but you could take syrup as well. You can find that in the stores easily. You can make your own. There's lots of recipes out on. So elderberry helps prevent viruses from attaching to our cells. So that's a good thing to take every day to if you're exposed to any viruses, which likely you would be. So that's one of the first things. I also like ginger, especially if you have nausea. Ginger is really great to alleviate nausea. So that's a really good thing to have on hand. Fresh ginger tea, so you just chop some up, put hot water over it, is really soothing.
Delicious.
If you're not feeling very good. Also, sore throat. If you have a sore throat, echinacea in a spray, where you can spray it into your throat. A good echinacea and a proper echinacea should actually cause a little tingling, numbness to your tongue if you put it on your tongue. And so it'll help alleviate some of that pain. But also echinacea is really good for helping the immune system do what it needs to do to help you heal. So some very common ones: vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D is also highly, highly important. Garlic also is good for many reasons. It is considered an antimicrobial herb. And just going back to that hot ginger tea, you can add some lime or lemon in it, a little bit of cayenne and pepper if you're so inclined. Yep.
So about this, I'll put this on our blog page. I'll talk about how to steam yourself and these items to keep handy. We're out of time, folks. Doc Jill, you're awesome. Thanks for sharing your vast amount of wisdom with us. I want to close this by saying Dr. Jill is a licensed naturopathic doctor in private practice in Bothell, Washington, and is accepting new patients. If you're living outside of the state of Washington, Dr. Jill is accepting health coaching clients. To book an appointment, visit her website, blueearthmedicine.com. And while there, sign up for her monthly newsletter, natural health products and podcast updates. From the Blue Earth Medicine Podcast, we're sending you healing energy, love, and light. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, share, and join us for our next episode. Peace, friends.